as the host of the next session. I am going to also invite up Shannon, Mauricio, and Michelle. I think we're all in the room here. Okay, come on up. Emma is an associate professor of sustainable grasslands and livestock production systems in the Department of Animal Science for the University of Manitoba. And I should really say Dr. McGo. I'm so bad at that. Is an original member of our protein consortium as well. So appointed in 2020. So I'm going to turn it over to Emma, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here.
Okay, so good morning, everybody, and I think we've had some really great conversation today around the area of sustainability of animal protein. So we are going to get going in the interest of time, but I am going to introduce our three panelists who are very fortunate to have with us here today. We are going to be talking about technological solutions to sustainable animal protein production. And our panelists will discuss new feed technologies and trends in animal nutrition, tracing emissions through the value chain, excuse me, and the circularity benefits of plant and animal protein production. So with that, I would like to firstly introduce Shannon Borden from Cargill Animal Nutrition. So Shannon has been with Cargill Animal Nutrition. She is their additive commercial leader for Canada and has spent the last 27 years in the large animal food production industry in Canada and the US. She initially joined Cargill in 1998 as a farm marketing representative, and through her Cargill career has also served as retail business development officer, regional sales manager, beef sales leader manager in Canada, and outside of Cargill has held positions including general manager and customer service representative. Currently she serves as Cargill's Canada Additives commercial leader, working within the Canadian region, helping veterinarians, nutritionists, large animal protein producers understand the impact of feeding programs by implementing microbiome technology into their operations. We also have with us today Mauricio Delgado, who's the Director of Sustainability Strategy and Partnerships at Maple Leaf Foods, where he's had a very varied career spanning 14 years. During his time at Maple Leaf, he's held diverse roles in sales, marketing, innovation, corporate strategy, manufacturing, and working in the office of the CEO. Mauricio is passionate about working in the sustainability space and the real potential that positive collective and collaborative actions can have for the generations to come. In his current role, he leads development of transformative projects for the organization, such as exploring and evaluating forays into anaerobic digestion, regenerative agriculture, and Scope 3 emission reductions through value chain partnerships and insetting approaches. And we also have with us today Michelle Finley, a veteran government and public affairs professional with over 17 years of experience in stakeholder engagement within diverse sectors, including not-for-profit, government, and private industry. She has been with Roquette since early 2020 as their first communications and public affairs manager for Canada. Advocating for Roquette and the entire plant-based protein sector in Canada has become a passion for Michelle, and she has gone all in seeking new connections to accelerate expansion of the country's domestic pulse processing capacity. Michelle was also recently elected to the board of directors for the Canadian Pulse and Special Crops Trade Association and serves on the Communication and Marketing Committee with Plant-Based Foods Canada. She's also a member of the Province of Manitoba Project Aspire Water and Wastewater Roundtable as part of the Manitoba Protein Advantage and represents Roquette as an industry advisor for Food and Beverage Manitoba's newly created Economic Advisory Table. So with that, I will invite Shannon to come forth first, and then we'll have each presenter give a short talk, and then we'll dive into some questions. So I think that is what you need.
Great. And do I just push this, Emma, to get it to go forward?
Green one, maybe.
The green one?
I think so. Yep, it's next.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Emma said, Shannon Borden. I am a born and raised Saskatchewan farm girl. Have enjoyed Manitoba the last 5 days. Have my colleague Kevin Larson with me from Iowa. Yesterday morning was the first time I was able to look at him and say, now this is the Manitoba weather I know. So, as Emma pointed out, my role within Cargill is to lead our Canadian Diamond V commercial additive business. And I come from the traditional animal nutrition formulation background over the last 27 years across Western Canada into the US, and really enjoying the opportunity to learn a little bit more about how we can do things differently and help our producers still be profitable. So Cargill corporately, which is our parent owner company, as well as our Diamond V team, we are committed to sustainability practices, climate change, land use, water resources, farmer prosperity, human rights are all big buckets in which our teams focus on. Some of the things that you may have seen, throughout Western Canada and Canada is obviously some really good work that Jeff and our team have done with CRSB, with Ducks Unlimited in different large animal food sectors across Canada, with the goal of collaborating towards with the supply chain towards sustainability. So the focus area that I am on is, Cher mentioned that our primary producers, their largest single output is their feed bill, the cost of production for those ingredients. And it is also the biggest impact as primary producers that we can have when it comes to our greenhouse goal emissions, methane reductions, et cetera, in the supply chain. So our role with our innovation team is to really focus in on how do we look at non-antibiotic solutions that help our producers really be efficient in their ROI and still be financially beneficial when we look at other feeding programs other than what we're traditionally used to. So that has changed immensely. When I think about the monogastric and ruminant diets that we formulated 27 years ago and took to the primary producers on the farm, we were essentially working for just that producer, for his ROI. Now when we go to farm and when our teams work with those primary producers in all species, we are really working with the consumer, we are working with the processor, and we are working with the primary producer when we design that nutrition program. And boy, have things changed in 27 years. When I think about how intricate feeding intelligence has gotten through mobile data application, herd management dashboards, facial recognition of cattle in the feed yard, in the dairy barns, drone GPS mapping. I just had my 74-year-old ranch mother say to me, I think we need to GPS the bulls in the south pasture. And I was like, holy mackerel, I didn't think that was ever going to happen. But cow signals, and ingredient nutritional analysis, and just the optimization of animal nutrition. And so when we work with primary producers at the farm gate, when I say the word sustainability to them, or our nutritionists or veterinarians do, the meaning of sustainability to them is ROI, right? What is my return on investment? And yes, how can I contribute? But I also need to be financially, I need to make money at doing this. And so the optimization is really now it's not the cow, it's about the how we do it to help them be sustainable and to meet that message at the consumer level. So, I think my message for today from our Diamond V team, which is our, feed additive division, is technology in feeding has changed immensely. And when I think about that 74-year-old who in 2018 was told by the veterinarian, you need a VHP to get that bottle of antibiotics now, and I'm not sure how many letters she wrote, but my message is our producers don't need to be frightened. Our primary producers don't need to be frightened because there is technology, research-driven technology out there that can assist them in their feeding programs. And in particular for us, we're really focused on the phytogenic side. What is phytogenics? Phytogenics are standardized, specific, and science-based combinations of bioactive compounds found in plants with proven efficiency and sustainable impact on animals, people, and the environment. And what is yeast fermentation? It's a natural immune support postbiotic feed additive. What is the challenge? The challenge is transferring the research and the knowledge to the primary producer and understanding what that ROI is. So with that, I'm very cognizant that team, we stand between these people and lunch. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Mauricio.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. So Mauricio, we'll have you come up next. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Next, the big green button. Good morning, my name is Mauricio, Director of Sustainability Strategy and Partnerships. Thank you for having us today. What I'm going to be covering with you is a quick overview of our sustainability agenda, including our strategic blueprint, and then I'll go into a couple of the technologies or big bets that we're making at Maple Leaf Foods, our foray into anaerobic digestion, and regen ag. Before I start, I would just like to point out that we don't have to go very far to understand why sustainability is such a hot topic and why it's such an urgent and important topic for us to embrace wholeheartedly. When we look at the total global greenhouse gas emissions, we know that 20 to 30%, I think Cher mentioned even 33%, depending on the stats that you're looking at, come from our sector. This is a US stat, but 80% of all the antibiotics in the US are used on farm animals. 800 million people today don't have proper nutrition, and that is on the context of 2 billion people being overweight. Also further on the context of about a third of all the food that we generate getting wasted. And think about that not just in the context of the dinner, at the dinner table when you scrape some of those leftovers into the compost bin, but everything that was taken to produce that food, right? The fertilizer, the water, the seeds, the fuel to power the tractor, the harvesting, the transportation, the processing facility, feeding the hogs, or the poultry, or the livestock, all the way to the dinner table. When that gets wasted, a third of all that gets wasted, right? 15 of the 16 hottest years on record have happened in the 21st century. We don't have to go very far to understand why it is that this is an important topic for us to tackle. At Maple Leaf Foods, we have become a purpose-driven organization. Another thing that I was happy to hear Cher talk about today. We define purpose, one of the the ways that we've understood purpose is this really interesting diagram, really simple to understand, that purpose lies at the intersection of what the world needs, which some of those things I just covered, and what we are uniquely positioned to tackle. We've put together our sustainability and strategic blueprint, which starts with our purpose, which is to raise the good in food. This statement is an aspirational statement which really talks about elevating the good that food can do. It's about continuous improvement, about never-ending that aspiration to do better through the things that we produce, like food. We look at sustainability across 4 different pillars. I'll touch on the environmental one mostly today, but we do look at it from a better food, which is that first pillar on the top right, making better food, more nutritious food, really being in touch with consumer needs, the environment, better planet, better care for our animals, ensuring that we are good stewards of the animals under our care, and then better people or better communities to ensure that we are being good neighbors and good stewards as well with those communities that we interact with. We endeavored a long time ago a few years ago, to define what sustainable meat means and how would we define it if it is that we are pursuing the task of being of going towards a more sustainable meat or protein system. I know a few of my colleagues traveled to the UK. They leaned on consulting and research institutes to really define some of those tenets. And what they came back with are that some of the sustainable meat principles are around the fact that sustainable meat is nutritious, healthy, and safe. It's accessible, affordable, and eaten in moderation. It's produced in adherence with environmental standards that measurably reduce impacts across the entire life cycle. It limits greenhouse gas emissions and the impacts that it has on water, while also avoiding the loss of biodiversity, as we've heard earlier today with our panel, that excellent panel on biodiversity. And it pursues the elimination of waste. It's raised with care, it's raised with minimal use of antibiotics, and it respects the 5 freedoms of animal welfare. It's produced in a resilient, fair, and efficient food system that makes optimal use of land and natural resources. And it's produced by a company that is responsive to the needs of society and transparently demonstrates accountability to social and environmental responsibility. In 2019, Maple Leaf Foods proudly announced that it became the world's first major carbon neutral food company, and I'll walk you guys through how we did that and what that means. In 2019, we also committed to science-based targets. We were only one of 3 animal protein companies globally to set science-based targets, and the only major food company in Canada back then to set science-based targets. This is our carbon inventory. You can find this on our website as well. In order to become carbon neutral, we first had to really dig deep and understand where the biggest sources of our emissions came from. So what you're seeing here is our emission sources across what are defined as the 3 scopes. Scope 1 is all around the emissions that are under our direct control. So think about our facilities, those hogs that are under our care, the transportation that we own. Scope 2 emissions are those indirect emissions associated with the energy that we purchase. We are blessed in Canada that we have very clean electricity, and therefore our Scope 2 emissions profile is very low. And Scope 3 emissions is everything within our supply chain. While that is not under our direct operational or financial control, we are obviously party to our value chain. We obviously purchase a lot of goods and services, and so this is what that reflects, the emissions associated with this. As with many other consumer packaged goods companies, the majority of our emissions lie in our Scope 3, and therein lies a big challenge for us. How do we tackle this if it's not under our direct operational control? And I'll talk about this in a moment as well. To note here is that the top sources of our emissions, both in Scope 1 and Scope 3, are animal raising activities. So you can see there on the top left at 6.6%, and the next 2 numbers are around fuel, which a big portion of it is fuel used to heat our barns, animal manure, and animal emissions. By far the biggest source of our emissions, animal production. Scope 3 are the biggest source also comes from animal production in an indirect way. All the feed and crop that we source from farmers to feed our pigs is what that 27.4% that you see there, what makes that up, the emissions that come from those farms. And then the next biggest emission source there, that 18%, is from third-party contract growers. So Maple Leaf Foods owns 40% of all the hogs that it processes, and the other 60% come from third-party contract growers. So that's what that emission bubble that you see there is. In order to achieve carbon neutrality, what we did was adopt a carbon management strategy, which is a simple way of understanding which starts with the understanding of where our emissions come from, which I just showed you, and then going through these 4 steps. The first step is really the most important step, which is to avoid, first and foremost, any carbon-intensive activities. Whatever we can't avoid, we seek to reduce or replace, and any residual emissions we then neutralize or offsets. A good example of avoiding carbon-intensive activities, we just commissioned and started up our London, Ontario poultry facility. In the design phase, when we were actually designing that facility and doing the center of gravity analysis to site that facility, one of the considerations that was taken into account was the proximity that it would be from a farmer's perspective, right? And therefore, the millions and millions of kilometers that would be saved, and therefore the emissions from that transport over the decades that facility would be operational. So by taking that into account, we avoided those millions of emissions, if you will. So avoiding is definitely always the first thing that we look to do. Whatever we're not able to avoid, we then look to reduce and replace. If we're able to electrify boilers, we're replacing carbon-intensive activities with less intensive sources. If we're able to run our facilities more efficiently or our barns more efficiently, we're reducing, again, the emissions associated with our operations. And then lastly, we invest in high-quality, third-party verified environmental projects to offset any residual emissions. And we do that every year until we achieve our goals. And we will be signing on to, when it's time to renew our science-based targets, to commit to net zero as well. So a big sort of mountain to climb still, but we are committed to being carbon neutral at every step of the way. In addition, from a reduction and replacing perspective, we've conducted audits at every single one of our facilities. Every single facility has had environmental consultants come through and tell us where it is that we can become better and more efficient at running our facilities across all of our utilities: electricity, water, natural gas, food loss waste, wastewater, solid waste, etc. We've identified over 1,300 projects and executed a little bit less than that since 2015. And again, energy conservation does save money, so this is again trying to sort of drive home the point that sustainability can be a profitable endeavor as well. We've saved over $17 million to date by executing on these utility initiatives. Today, within our Maple Leaf Agri-Farms business, we do generate obviously a lot of hog manure within both our operations and our third-party contracted growers' operations. 1.2 billion liters to be exact of hog manure, though 100% of that does get recycled back through drag hose land application on nearby fields, which is great news from a nutrient management plan perspective. We are returning those nutrients back to the field. The bad news is that before that happens in the fall, during the summer months, unfortunately, it does sit in lagoons and emits methane. And therefore, that is, again, one of the biggest things that we want to understand in terms of how we can affect the biggest sources of our emissions here. Animal manure, as you can see there, that 5.3, that 2.1 underneath it, and then on the right side, that 18.6. So we're doing forays today into anaerobic digestion. We're evaluating the business case of how we would do this. Could we do this at Maple Leaf? What would be the benefits? Who can we collaborate with, etc. Anaerobic digestion, for those of you that are not familiar with the technology, it's actually a somewhat simple technology. It works much like a cow's stomach. A complex microbial community digests organic waste in a sealed vessel, such as an anaerobic digestion tank, devoid of oxygen, hence the word anaerobic. And the outputs of anaerobic digestion are methane, which is biogas, which is mostly methane, that gets collected now instead of it being released into the atmosphere. And what we can do with biogas today is convert it into electricity, we can convert it into heat, we can compress it into compressed renewable natural gas as vehicle fuel, turn it into green hydrogen or green diesel or hydrogen, or as well, which is what we're looking into pursuing, is to convert it or upgrade it into renewable natural gas, which is a drop-in replacement for fossil natural gas, which again would help with both the fuel that is required to heat our operations, as well as decarbonizing some of our other operations as needs for fuel. And then on the other side as well, it produces digestate. So whatever comes into the digester mostly comes out. And so that digestate is also a great source of organic fertilizer, except that it's now virtually odorless. So we become much better neighbors for sure. And also it's more bioavailable to the soil and the plants. So it's a much better source of fertilizer. It also has the ability to get post-processed even further, where we can then nutrient manage. We know that there's certain areas in Manitoba that have a nutrient overload, so we were able to actually manage those nutrients out of the digestates and be able to more properly apply nutrients to the fields. So as you can see, I've grayed out here all the other emission sources that are not affected by anaerobic digestion, but if you can just appreciate for a second how many sources of emissions anaerobic digestion has the potential to affect within our business. We're able to produce renewable natural gas, thereby impacting that first bubble, fuel. Animal manure would get the emissions from animal manure would get eliminated almost completely by eliminating it sitting on the lagoons. Animal emissions, I've been told, could also potentially be reduced somewhat as we flush out the barns more frequently because of the need to transport it to an anaerobic digestion, thereby reducing the amount of time that the manure sits in the barns and therefore decomposes, affecting that 2%. Biogas has a little bit of CO2. If we're able to scrub out that CO2, we're actually able to also reutilize it in our operations. Our Brandon kill facility uses CO2 stunning. We would be able to reutilize that CO2 into stunning potentially. And then, like I mentioned, we can compress the renewable natural gas and create a fuel, thereby reducing the emissions from freight. So again, a lot of different emission sources would be tackled by this one technology. I mentioned that we can also create electrical power from it, and then similarly on the right-hand side, by eliminating the emissions and the fuel usage in our third-party contracted grower barns, we're able to affect that 18%. And lastly, if we're able to also bring in some of the waste that currently unfortunately goes to landfill, divert it from landfill and bring it to the digesters, that 3.7% would also be addressed, because it would no longer be decomposing in landfills and emitting methane, which is the source of that 3.7, but rather being reutilized and recirculated back to the land, and the methane being captured. So definitely a big bet for us and something that we're excited to explore further. And thank you to anybody in the room, I'm looking around, who has so far helped with this process. The other big bet that we have is on regenerative agriculture. So if you guys recall, that 27.4% on feed and crop production is affected by the emissions from those farms. So regenerative agriculture has been described already a couple of times, but it has the potential to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, become better stewards of the land overall, and reduce the overall emissions intensity of the crop that we are sourcing. We have two ways that we're investing in regenerative ag. One is through offsets. Offsets happen outside of our supply chain. So when we invest in environmental projects, regenerative agricultural environmental projects outside of our supply chain, we're investing in offsets. And we have been doing that for some time now with various different partners. When we invest in environmental regen ag projects within our value chain, then they become insets or scope 3 reductions. And we have a current project today that's live with Nutrien, where we are sort of intervening together with the farmers, right? Nutrient sits upstream of the farmer and they sell them fertilizer. We sit downstream from the farmer and source grains. So we share that Scope 3 emission at the farmer's field. And by intervening together, we're able to reduce the emissions factor of those grains that we're sourcing. So Regen Ag for us has the ability to affect that 27.4% bubble. My last slide is just, you guys probably can't see all the names there, but just showing, again, the benefits that being committed to sustainability has had. This is the collar FAIR Protein Producer Index. FAIR is the Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Index. So it's more of an investor index or tool to see what type of risk investors can expect to have from companies, and it's done on a risk and overall opportunity basis. So depending on the types of initiatives that a certain company is taking, they would be classified as high risk or low risk or medium risk. We're proud to announce this actually just came in a couple of weeks ago. Maple Leafs is one of the top, if not, I think the top pork and poultry processor in North America from a risk rating standpoint. So again, being viewed favorably from an investment standpoint. Again, just trying to underscore the positive things that come from adopting a sustainable mindset. And that's it. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Mauricio. And Michelle, we'll have you.
Okay, thanks. I'm so excited to be here. I think I was just mentioning to our panelists earlier that I think if you had looked back, if you tried to have this conference 10 years ago, I think it would be very unlikely that you'd have a plant-based protein producer standing up here with animal protein producer. So I think just the fact that I got an invite is a lot of progress. So thank you very much for the intro, and you have my background. I have only 2 slides. So first I want to talk about the world's largest pea protein plant, which Roquette built in the beautiful community of Portage-la Prairie, Manitoba. Broke ground in, I think, mid-2017. And by 2018, obviously, construction was starting on site. But what was happening behind the scenes was really interesting as well. So we did have, our full intent was to partner with livestock producers in Manitoba. That was always part of the plan. It's always been part of Roquette's business plan. The company is family-owned, founded in 1933, and has always had a very robust, very strong animal nutrition division. So it was always going to be part of this plant. The plant is about 200,000 square feet. We employ 130 people. Now, in that red square there, that's a very special part of the plant. That's our pea feed load out section. Now, what Roquette has done is figured out a way, I'll just flip to my only second slide. Roquette's figured out a way to valuize 100% of the yellow peas that it brings on site. So there's no waste. We're not putting any part of the yellow pea into the waste system. There's nothing going to landfills. There's nothing going into the waste stream. And that's very deliberate. It's been part of their mandate, part of their DNA is sustainability. So this makes a lot of sense. Now, we always talk about why Manitoba. We get asked this question all the time. Why did you put the world's largest pea protein plant in Portage-la Prairie, Manitoba? Now, the top 4, I call them the 4 Ps. We're people. We have a lot of skilled labor between Winnipeg, Brandon, and Portage, so we're able to staff our plant. Power is hydroelectric power was a key factor. The other one is position. Someone else was talking about logistics. The geographical position of our plant is optimum to reach our customer base in North America. And of course, the 4th one and the most important one is the yellow peas, proximity to our yellow peas. All of our yellow peas come from Manitoba and Saskatchewan. None of our peas are walking further than about 8 hours from the plant at this point in time. But there's another special reason why Manitoba was really the perfect location for this plant. And it's the relationship that we've been able to form with livestock producers around the province. So while the plant was being constructed, we brought over our animal nutritionist from France. His name is Christian Delport, And this guy hit the ground running. I think he hit every fall dinner. He hit hockey tournaments. He was pounding the pavement, north, south, east, west, making connections with the dairy industry, with the pork industry, and the beef industry here in Manitoba. And when we were ready to fire up the plant, 100% of our livestock feed was already sold. We have a really interesting predicament where we could sell far more than we're making currently. It's been so well received. So we've created what we call a circular economy in cooperation with livestock producers in Manitoba. It's something that's really important. I think that the media will portray this relationship between the animal protein sector and the plant-based protein sector as adversarial, maybe in some cases. For Roquette, it's not. It's very much a relationship. Without our livestock producers purchasing this feed from us, the amount of waste that would go into the waste stream is significant. At capacity, we'll be selling 160,000 metric tons of feed products. Now, just imagine if that was going into the waste stream, if we had to dispose of that, you're talking about some major emissions as that would decompose or break down in landfills and other facilities. So being able to valorize it and sell it, most of our pea feed right now is in the form of a product called pea cream. Now, that's a liquid pea feed. It's made out of the fiber and solubles that come out of our wet fractionation process. Now, that pea cream it's new to Canada. It's been used in Europe very successfully for over a decade. The feedback we've gotten from local producers here is their animals are responding well to it. They like the price point. It does require some investment on site. We're looking for larger livestock producers to take this product in. There's pumps and tanks that need to be installed on site. It does have a good shelf life, 4 to 6 weeks, because we do add some acidification to it. But it doesn't travel far. We don't need to have it travel very far. All of our pea cream is sold to producers within a 250 kilometer radius. So we've really cut down on that carbon footprint from the transportation. We also sell pea screenings, so that's the first cleaning stage on site. We capture those pea screenings and sell those to livestock producers. We also make pea hull pellets on site, so we take the hulls off. We have a pelletizer in our flour workshop, and then of course the pea cream. So what's coming up new for us next year is we're going to take that pea cream and we'll start to dry it. We haven't actually turned on our pea feed dryer yet. We haven't needed to. Pea cream's so popular, but there are clients that want a dry version of pea cream, and it'll have a longer shelf life, obviously, and be able to be transported to further distance. So summing it up is, I really wanted to stress that plant-based protein can work very well. There's a very good partnership here with animal protein producers in Manitoba, and I think it's a model for a circular economy. And I think that it's really important to have us sitting at the same table and working together, looking to produce food for animals and humans in a sustainable way. I think we need livestock producers, and livestock producers can really benefit from having a relationship with us. So that's all I have. I'm gonna send it back to these folks here. That's it. Do you want me to turn this off, or I'll just leave it there?
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to all our speakers for your insight here this morning. We probably have maybe 7 minutes or so, 9, okay, close enough. Okay, so I'll maybe ask one question of the speakers, and then if we have time to squeeze a quick one in from the audience. We've talked this morning, or you guys have talked this morning, about large technical advantage or solutions that have been brought in by your organizations. But what do you think are the steps that are needed to encourage adoption, both from an on-farm and processor perspective, and how can we encourage this as an industry?
This way? Oh, no. Oh, it's on? Yep. So I'm gonna focus on the on-farm and let you do the processor. So adoption on-farm of these technological sustainable feeding additives for producers. I really think that it's getting the research and the information to industry. Lots of advances in the Microbiome research of the gut of large animal food production has been intensified over the last 8 years, and I think we lack at getting that information to the primary producer. And so I think we could do, as an industry overall, a better job of being more communicative and collaborative with that primary producer on the research that has been done and is out there to help them be more sustainable in their operations.
I would say from a producer standpoint, it definitely starts with the intention. I think a lot of the technological advancements that are required for us to make meaningful, sustainable change are already here. We don't need to go sort of to the bleeding edge of technology to make very meaningful impacts. One of the things that has helped us definitely internally is to rethink some of those investment models of how we adopt, how do we invest in new technology. One of the things that we've adopted for capital projects, for example, at Maple Leaf, is to burden them with a carbon tax. So if historically we would look at a project simply by the merits of its return on investment, devoid of the impacts that it has on the environment, sometimes it would not actually pass that ROI, and therefore we would not adopt it. And today, if we have a project that potentially has a lower ROI, but when you take into account the fact that it would save emissions and therefore save the amount of, for example, investment that we would be required on the back end to do offset projects, that carbon tax that is avoided plays into the overall return on investment and therefore accelerates the adoption. It accelerates the intent in investing in those projects. And we're looking at how do we incorporate things like biodiversity, risk into the less tangible ones into those projects as well, so that we can accelerate the investment that we have there.
Oh, I have my own. Is this one working? Okay. Yes. I rarely get my own mic. So I think from a food processor's point of view, I think that investment in food processing technology, Roquette has a lot of proprietary equipment in the Portage pea protein plant. A lot of it's been developed over many years to valuize all of the, the co-products or first products, as we call it, from all of the different plant-based crops that they produce around the world. So I think moving technology, investment in technology, R&D, and engineering within food production will go a long way in moving the needle on sustainability and making sure that we're upcycling. If that's, I think, a new trendy term is upcycling, and diverting as much as possible from the waste streams back into protein production, whether it's animal protein or maybe fish or something like that. There's a lot of interesting opportunities there. It's just going to take investment, incentive, and research and development.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have time for a quick, okay, with 4 minutes. Are there any questions from anybody in the audience? We have a couple of minutes. Yes.
I'm just wondering when byproducts become a bit of a race to the bottom, from the point of view that you've got so many companies trying to push byproducts out into the market. And so what that's doing is it's decreasing the value on that stream. And the question for the industry is, how do you spin that around and increase the value? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. I'll speak to that. So take, for instance, pea starch. So pea starch is the major part of the pea. It's about 50 to 60% of the yellow pea. Now, Canada's moving to a single-use ban on plastics. There's a tremendous opportunity here to see if we can take pea starch or other plant-based, what would be considered a secondary or waste product, and spin it into something useful, such as a plant-based single-use plastic product. So that takes research and development. It takes investment. So there's tons of opportunity like that. The more, the closer we can valuize the co-products from our protein production. The closer we can get that value home to our home base, the better for everyone. So right now, pea starch, most of it is destined for the southern U.S., used in industrial applications, but we're very keen to see a market develop in Canada for that. The same goes with the animal feed. I mean, there are certain companies that valuize pea fiber as a part of a human. They have a human nutrition customer for that, but the market is very small for that. So any sort of research and development where we can continue to increase value of those co-products will certainly be beneficial, and I think it's like, it just builds mass, builds capacity over time.
Okay, great. We might just leave it there in the interest of time, but I would like to thank again our speakers for joining us this morning. So. And I think we've heard a lot of great things this morning. Our animal protein sector is doing a lot of good in this area of sustainability, and we're going to hear more about it this afternoon. So again, just thank you to our speakers and to everybody. I know lunch is coming pretty quickly, so I will maybe, do you want back up here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists and to our host. I have the great pleasure of saying it's lunchtime.